No, he said. Thank you, Dean Arvidsson, the Bell Choir, and Marianne Orlando. Good morning. I am RuPaul Vaught. I am on the Board of Assessors here at First Parish, and I'll be your worship associate this morning. First Parish in Framingham is a welcoming congregation. We celebrate and welcome people of all sexual orientations, races, ages, gender identities, abilities, and beliefs. We welcome people. We welcome you if you're joining us in the meeting house, on Zoom, or if you're watching the service after the fact. Whoever you are, whoever you love, and wherever you are in life's journey, you are welcome here. Unitarian Universalism is a progressive, inclusive faith, guided by moral principles such as the worth and dignity of all. We draw inspiration from world religions and philosophies, science, history, and the arts. I draw your attention to the announcements in the order of service. Immediately following our service, you're invited to join us for coffee hour over at Scott Hall across the courtyard. For the safety and comfort of all, please remember to keep your mask on at all times when you're inside a First Parish building, unless you are actively eating or drinking. Please also turn your phones and other devices that might make noise to their quietest setting. And finally, I want to tell you something that since 1701, people have gathered as this community seeking peace and seeking meaning. These people are like you. You belong here, maybe only for the next hour, but we hope for longer. You belong here, and we are happy to have you with us. I now invite you to take a deep breath in and out. Continue to take a few more deep breaths over the next few moments. Begin to let go of what you need to let go of to be more fully present to yourself, one another, and the sacred in this time and place. A flame within a chalice is a primary symbol of the Unitarian Universalist faith tradition. It symbolizes the light of reason, the warmth of community, and the flame of hope. It is our tradition begin our worship by kindling the flame of our chalice. Elizabeth will light the chalice and will say these words. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning and celebration of the life we share together. Please rise in body or spirit to sing hymn number 108, My Life Flows in Endless Song, and remain standing for our sung affirmation and spoken affirmation.
doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to speak knowledge in freedom, to serve all life with compassion, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. This is our great covenant, one with another and with our God.
You may be seated.
Good morning. My name is Elizabeth Kavanaugh Murphy, and I serve as ministerial intern here at First Parish. And I am pleased, in Lauren's absence, to share this morning's story. Our story is called Playing Fair. It was written by Janine Grossmeyer and published in her book, A Lamp in Every Corner. As you hear this story, I invite you to consider our fifth principle, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. In kid language, we sometimes say, this means all people need a vote. It was a warm summer evening, that glorious time between supper being over and having to get ready for bed, when the fireflies start to appear one by one. 3 children went outside to play. But what should we play? Asked Tabitha, who was the oldest of them all by 4 months and 2 days. She had bright, shiny braces and beads braided into her hair. Let's play tag, said Alex, who was the next oldest by 2 months and 15 days. He always wore his baseball hat sideways, and he always wore his t-shirt tucked in. Let's play hide and seek, said Sheena, who was the youngest of the 3. She had 3 braids in her long, dark hair, 2 little ones in front on either side of her face, and 1 bigger braid that hung far down her back. Tag, said Alex. Hide and seek, said Sheena. Tag. Hide and seek. Tag. Hide and seek. Stop it, said Tabitha, stomping her foot and crossing her arms. Let's vote. Sheena looked at Alex, and Alex looked at Sheena, and they both said, okay. We can have secret ballots and everything, said Tabitha. And soon enough, she ran inside her house and brought back paper and pencils and even a shoebox with a skinny hole cut in the top. Sheena took her piece of paper and wrote hide and seek in neat and careful letters. Then she folded her paper, put it through that skinny hole in the box. Alex and Tabitha were already gone. All right, now we count them, said Tabitha, and she took the lid off the box and unfolded each paper. Tag, hide and seek, tag. It's 2-1, tag wins. Okay, said Sheena, and the 3 of them played tag until their parents called them inside to get ready for bed. The next night, Tabitha brought the shoebox, and they voted again. It's 2-1, announced Tabitha. Tag wins. Sheena sighed. Okay. Tag won the next night, too. And the night after that. And the night after that. It's not fair, Sheena said. But we voted on it, Alex replied, and that was true. And besides, they lived in a democratic country, and in a democracy, voting is the way to decide. It's still not fair, Sheena muttered. And so the next night, when tag won again, she decided not to play. Oh, come on, said Tabitha. Tag isn't fun with only 2 people. Tag isn't fun at all, Sheena said darkly. I'm tired of playing tag, and I quit. Well, Tabitha looked to Alex, and Alex looked to Tabitha, and then they both looked at Sheena, who wouldn't look at either one of them at all. Tabitha jingled the beads braided into her hair. Alex turned his baseball hat so it was pointed the other way. And then Alex said, well, maybe instead of voting all the time, we could take turns. Sheena looked up. Take turns? Yeah, 2 nights playing tag because there are 2 of us who like it. Then 1 night playing hide and seek because there's 1 of you. We could start tonight, said Tabitha. We could even play hide and seek for a couple of nights in a row because we haven't played it at all yet. How does that sound, Sheena? Well, that sounds great, Sheena said. I'm gonna go hide. Me too, said Alex. That means you're it, Tabitha. And he and Sheena ran off to hide while Tabitha closed her eyes and counted. Sometimes slow, sometimes a little too fast. And when she got to 100, she yelled, ready or not, here I come. And on that warm summer evening, in the glorious time between supper being over and having to get ready for bed, as the fireflies appeared one by one, the 3 children played outside until their parents called them home. Now is the time in our service we set aside to share among this community the joys, sorrows, and milestones we feel deepest in our hearts. Reminder that everyone is welcome to share joys and sorrows to be spoken aloud each week, either via email or in the book in the back of the mailhouse. First this morning, Dave and Debbie share their joy that they've celebrated their daughter's wedding on Friday, October 14th. Lizzie and Aaron share that our dog Knox returned and was found in good health. Sarah shares her joy for the beautiful new carpet installed in the sanctuary. Ben lifts up a sorrow, thinking about the passing of 2 famous actors, Angela Lansbury and Robbie Coltrane. May they rest in peace. Lauren shares the joy. I'm relishing the beautiful gifts nature has bestowed upon us this week. And then we have a few more. We have recognition and gratitude for a wonderful concert held yesterday and the beautiful music shared. And Dean shares a joy that the concert went very well, and for all who helped, thank you so much, especially also to Tom Osfeld for recording. And final thanks to everyone who attended yesterday. And now we light one more candle and hold space here together for all the happiness and heartache that remains unspoken, yet felt deeply within us all.
This is the time in our service that we set aside for going a little bit deeper. Invite you to focus on your breath in, your breath out. Notice what is holding you up. Maybe the chair beneath you, maybe a bed, maybe the people in our community. As we feel grounded and centered, imagine connecting to the earth beneath you. All of the things that are in between you and the earth. Carpet, wood, cement, something else. In this space of contemplation where we are grounded to our breath, to the earth beneath us, we turn to our left and our right, noticing people that are there. We give thanks for this community. We know that it did not have to be this way. We give thanks for nature around us, for leaves dropping, turning the landscape a beautiful array of golden, red, and orange. We give thanks for what we have. We know too, in our community, there are people who are suffering, people who go without, people who mourn, or are lonely, or who are ill, people who live with mental illness or addiction. Let us find ways, and may we be emboldened to reach out and let those who are lonely know that they are not alone. This world is beautiful, and there is also deep brokenness. Though it can feel challenging, let us each work to bring peace to our part of the world, and may that peace ripple outward. May we also work to bend the arc of the universe towards justice, ending oppression in all of its forms, but knowing that that work begins with us. And I am sorry to say, but perhaps glad to say as well, because we are human, we make mistakes. We fumble with our words. We fail to see the love in ourselves, in others, and in the world around us. But here's the good news: because we are breathing, there is still time to return to right relationship. It does not happen in an instant, but it can still happen. It begins by saying, "I'm sorry, please forgive me. How can I do better?" Say these words and do all things for love's sake. Let us now sit in the quiet of this ancient house so that we might rest or listen or simply do absolutely nothing for the next minute. I'll keep track of the time. Amen.
The words for this morning's invitation to the offering are some of my favorites. And they're written by Jessica Lynn. I come on Sunday feeling weary, having worn out the snooze button on my alarm clock. I come on Sunday feeling frightened, having seared my eyes reading the latest news. I come on Sunday feeling burdened, having fretted about my workday worries. But I leave Sunday service feeling refreshed, having been renewed by the spirit of love in the community that exists here. I leave Sunday service feeling whole, feeling lifted up by the words of righteous challenge. I leave Sunday service feeling energized, ready to continue our fight for peace and justice. This haven, this refuge, this place of worship and wonder exists because we make it so with our contributions, the gifts of our time, our skills, our food, our love, our laughter, and our money. Please join in giving so that we may continue to have a place that fortifies and challenges us in these trying and troubled times. We'll now gratefully receive the offering. Thank you. Please join us now in singing our children off to religious exploration this morning. Democracy by Langston Hughes. Democracy will not come today, this year, nor ever through compromise and fear. I have as much right as the other fellow has to stand on my 2 feet and own the land. I tire so of hearing people say, let things take their course. Tomorrow is another day. I do not need my freedom when I'm dead. I cannot live on tomorrow's bread. Freedom is a strong seed planted in a great need. I live here too. I want freedom just as you.
So here is what I know. Since the election of a certain president of our United States, I have come to appreciate how fragile our democracy is. By democracy, I mean the system of government by which the people have a voice in what happens. There are events that have happened since November of 2016 that have convinced me that it is stronger, but it feels as well as though the tapestry that we have come to wrap ourselves in as a country has become unraveled. That 58th quadrennial election in 2016 shook me and woke me up to the state of our democracy. Until then, a line from my favorite band, the Avett Brothers, rang true. And your life doesn't change by the man that's elected. They have since recanted that line and usually expand it as well, the gender that they're referencing there. I acknowledge that based on my social location as a straight, white, cisgender, temporarily able-bodied male, my freedoms have never quite felt under attack. But that has shifted. Maybe it was a widening awareness after that election. For you, you may have already been well aware of the fragile state of our democracy. I'm glad that you had that awareness, and I'm sorry that I didn't listen to folks like you before November of 2016. Over those intervening 6 years, I've become increasingly aware, concerned, alarmed at the state of our nation's democracy, which is to say the various ways in which our rights have been chipped away, various protections tossed aside, and the various ways the ballot box has been barred for many. During much of the upheaval in the summer of 2020, I wondered if it would be the last Independence Day our country would experience. I was serving a congregation in Lawrence, Kansas at the time. And maybe it was the pandemic, Maybe it was how they normally do Independence Day there. As I was driving around the roads of Lawrence, I noticed that there was no one firework display. Everyone had their own displays, and I thought this really represents this feeling of our own separate Americas that we have. And friends, in some ways, I wish it was the last Independence Day, because I wanted us instead to focus on interdependence, a turn towards how we might depend on our neighbor rather than fear them, a turn to how we might realize that we are not individuals in a community, but rather how we exist in community with one another, that we might appreciate and live into the words of the letter from Birmingham jail that Martin Luther King Jr. wrote, when he said, in a real sense, all life is interrelated. All are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly, he wrote, affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you may never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. When we realize that even if an issue doesn't affect us directly, it affects others directly. And therefore, we are impacted as well. When will we realize this? And there are days that I walk around outside and I wonder what freedoms will continue to be eroded. And when will my life continue to be directly affected? There are nights that I cannot sleep because I worry about turmoil, political violence, and actual violence. As you know, I turn to nature and poetry as a spiritual practice in good times so that I might have an anchor in the bad times. Wendell Berry's poem that begins, when despair for me grows in the world and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's life may be. This speaks to me when I have trouble falling asleep. However, it does not seem like I can continue to go and lie down where the ducks feed and the heron are. I cannot truthfully, with all my heart, come into the presence of still waters until I do something about that despair. I speak about strengthening democracy today because it is a core tenet of our faith tradition. Since at least 1961, when the first principles of our denomination were passed, this was what the third principle at the time read: to affirm, defend, and promote the supreme worth of every human personality, the dignity of all, and the right of the democratic process in human relations. In 1985, the third principle's aims were distributed to the first and the fifth principles, affirming that we will promote the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and society at large. Now, this orientation of our faith tradition, it's not a 1961 invention. We can also trace it back to 1917, when the Universalist General Convention passed what they called the Declaration of Social Principle. It had these words: "We therefore declare the primal task of the Church today to be the reconstruction of the world's civilizations in terms of justice, peace, and righteousness, so that the spiritual life of all may develop to its fullest capacity." And this was the second principle of that: a social order in which there shall be equal rights for all, special privilege for none, and the help of the strong for the weak until the weak become strong. This has weight to it. Feels powerful to me, imagining a world that has never existed and might take a very long time to create. Over the years, our denomination's General Assembly has also passed various statements around democracy. and the preserving of it, probably around 12 or 15. We do not have the time to get into them today. Suffice to say, our faith tradition promotes this. We work towards it. I speak about democracy and how to strengthen it because many scholars agree that our democracy as it exists now is under threat. When democracies falter, there is the additional risk of violence. We must join with all people whose rights are denied and take not for granted a privileged place. It comes from our hymnal. I speak about strengthening democracy in this loose set of prophetic sermons that I am preaching this year because I want to make you aware of what are the key issues of our time. And I want us to imagine what we might do with this new awareness. Now, if you want to play out the possibility of what happens when democracy erodes, I would turn to Barbara F. Walters' book, How Civil Wars Start and How to Stop Them. And I would focus on the how to stop them part because the rest of the book is fairly bleak. In this book, Walter examines civil wars and post-World War II democracies and how they began. She speaks with people who experienced these wars, and then she draws parallels to United States history, especially recent events in our nation. This book was published in 2022, so it's fairly up to date. She determines that the countries that are most likely to have a civil war break out are the ones where either authoritarian or democratic rule have slipped into what some deem a semi-democracy or an anocracy, A-N-O-C-R-A-C-E. Anocracy. This is a form of government that mixes democratic with autocratic features, or a regime that merits and allows some means of participation through opposition group behavior, but has incomplete development of mechanisms to address grievances. She writes in this book that both democracies and dictatorships are fairly stable. The anocracy, however, is not. She writes that democratic countries that veer into anocracy do so not because their leaders are untested or weak, but rather because elected leaders, many of whom are quite popular, start to ignore the guardrails that protect their democracies. She explains that sometimes politicians in these anocracies use legal methods, partisan appointments, executive orders, and parliamentary votes. They're able to consolidate power in ways that other politicians are unable or unwilling to stop. I have to say, I ordered this book and I preach this sermon with trepidation. I don't like to be scared when I read or when I preach. Walter agrees with me, saying that no one wants to believe that their beloved democracy is in decline or headed toward war. The decay is often so incremental that people often fail to notice or understand it, even as they're experiencing it. Because that decay can be so incremental, I believe it is the duty of the preachers to preach about this subject, even if it is scary. Now, there is a think tank called the Polity Project, which tracks dictatorships, anocracies, and democracies using a 21-point scale, with a positive 10 being a stable democracy and a negative 10 being a stable dictatorship, and the 0 right in the middle being an anocracy. These ratings are determined on how free elections are from government control, how constrained the executive branch is, how open and institutionalized political participation is, and how competitive the recruitment is for the presidency. So where do we fall on this scale? Well, on January 6th, 2021, the United States fell to a positive 5 on the Polity scale, the lowest that it had been since the year 1800. Even during the Civil War, according to the Polity Project's ratings, it only dipped to a positive 8. So with this fact out there, based on one scale, where is there hope? Well, for one, in this book, she turns to other places where democracy was strengthened. She looks at the example of South Africa, which for decades was solidly a positive for, solidly an anocracy. Walter says that South Africa reminds us of the power of leaders, being political leaders, opposition leaders, or business leaders. When the cost of maintaining their dominance became too high and business leaders were hurt by sanctions instead of reform, they dismantled it. What else prevents a civil war and a change in democracy and strengthens it? It's simply strengthening the quality of the government. This means an equal and impartial application of legal procedure. This means the extent to which citizens can participate in selecting their government and expressing their feelings about it. This means increasing the quality of public services or bolstering the rule of law, give all citizens equal access to the vote, and improve the quality of government services. There are many steps that this could take, but the key is restoring trust in democracy. Erica Liu, a community organizer who Walter interviews in her book, says that too many people are profoundly and willfully ignorant about power, what it is, what forms it takes, who has it, who doesn't, why that is, and how it is exercised. Our democracy works only if enough of us believe that democracy works. Where else is there hope? Small movements seeking to restore civic values. Two leaders of an organization called Citizens University explain that the goal of their organization is to put an end to the myth that we are a rugged, individualistic society, when the truth is that throughout history, when disaster strikes, when a community needs rebuilding, when people are in need, Americans come together to help one another. That's who they really are, they say. The small nature of these movements may seem frustratingly slow to those who want this full restoration of democracy, but these small voluntary associations are key. Of course, throughout this book, as you read it, you have to believe Walter's framework. She presents one framework and uses data to support her picture. Some have lauded her work, saying it's a necessary wake-up call. Others have criticized it, as happens with work like this. With all this, what I am most curious about is what actions we might be willing to take. We can look back at so many actions that have furthered democracy and viewed them as events that have completed, when we actually forget the inner turmoil, the work, and the conflict that leads up to somebody siding with love, that leads up to a strengthened democracy. We hear the story about Charles Sumner, a Unitarian senator caned nearly to death on the floor of the Senate by a representative because of his belief that Kansas should be admitted to the Union as a free state. Where we hear about the martyrdom of Reverend James Reeb and Viola Liuzzo, who were Unitarians who were killed in Selma, Alabama during the Civil Rights Movement. We lift their example up as a completed story with an ending, and all the moral struggles before we sort of forget, because that's what happens when we tell stories from history. They sided with love, and we forget the struggle that happened before. This work does not happen with neglect or neutrality. You must remember what Langston Hughes said in the poem that Elizabeth read about 20 minutes ago, when he said, I tire so of hearing people say, let things take their course. Tomorrow is another day. I do not need my freedom when I am dead. You cannot live on tomorrow's bread. So my friends gathered here in this meeting house on Zoom, watching after the fact. What I am most interested with a sermon like this is not whether you agree or disagree with it. Because I think no matter where you fall, you know that there are ways that we can make our democracy stronger. So what are we going to do with this new awareness or new energy when it comes to the declining health of this democracy? And if it does decline further, what will you do to protect those who might be directly harmed by a more authoritarian government? I go back to the Universalist General Convention's Declaration of Social Principles. And they write about a social order in which there shall be equal rights for all, special privilege for none, the help of the strong for the weak until the weak become strong. What will each of us do to work to create that world? May it be so. We will now rise in body or spirit. Both of those work just fine to sing our closing hymn, which is number 155, Circle Round for Freedom, and we're going to sing that twice. Send you forth with these words of benediction as we leave this friendly place. Let us take the light of love out into the world and use it to brighten our pathways. And when we need to rest or recharge, be challenged or affirmed, may that light guide us safely back. May we hold the light always, and the light hold us always. Amen. We go in peace.
I just came in.